Welcome to the Mindful CIO Podcast, where we explore the human side of tech leadership and what it takes to mindfully and sustainably lead high-performing tech teams. Hello, I'm your host, Nathalie Heynderickx, executive coach, leadership facilitator, and founder of the Mindful CIO community. In today's episode, I'm joined by Angela Anthony, Executive General Manager of IT and Digital at Dulux Group. With over 30 years of experience leading digital and transformation agendas across industries and continents, Angela brings a truly global perspective to tech leadership, having held executive roles at organizations like Accenture, Medibank, and Cathay Pacific. In this thoughtful conversation, Angela shares how diversity of thought, self-care, and storytelling underpin her approach to leading high-performing teams. We explore how human-centered leadership translates directly into bottom-line impact, from team engagement to better strategy and innovation. She also shares how Pilates, dog walks, and walk and talks with friends help her stay centered. We discuss mentorship, vulnerability, the importance of empathy, and how leadership must evolve to reflect the complexity and responsibility of today's world. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Mindful CIO Podcast, where we explore the human side of tech leadership. Today, we have the honor of speaking with Angela Anthony. Angela is the Executive General Manager of IT and Digital at Dulux Group. Angela has over 30 years of experience in information technology and digital leadership in complex environments across the public and private sectors. Her extensive career has spanned industries including financial services, aviation, and health services, and across geographies including Asia, the US, Europe, and Australia. She has held senior leadership positions in some of the largest Australian and global companies, including Accenture, ANZ Bank, Cathay Pacific Airways, and Medibank. So welcome, Angela. Such an honor to have you here. Thanks so much for accepting to have a conversation today.
Thank you, Nathalie. Very excited to be on and really appreciate the opportunity to spend this little bit of time.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, Angela, as you probably know, I don't know how much of the past episodes you had a look before, but I like to start the conversation with a little bit of a personal touch. So we met a while ago at Alex Carr event, and there is a lot that we can find about you online and on LinkedIn. But what is one thing that will be hard to know about Angela Anthony that we cannot find that's not publicly available?
I think what you can't find online publicly at a personal level is that my family and I are what I'd like to describe as a little bit of a little segment of the United Nations, in that my husband is Irish and was born in Belfast, and his great grandmother was Japanese on his mother's side. And I was born in Malaysia of Indian heritage. And so my children are a little bit of everything, right? So, conversations in our family, and I, as you mentioned at the introduction, I've worked in so many different parts of the world. We are a family that's a little bit of United Nations. I mean, we don't have any one area can represent little bits of everything.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, lucky children of yours, right? To have that exposure from, mom and dad side, that variety. I can imagine that the culture in your home. Really good. And Angela, in regards, as you know, the Mindful CIO podcast, here we explored the human side of tech leadership, and the conversations are very much based or guided by the Mindful CIO Manifesto. And, the Manifesto 1.0, we had 10 declarations, and the 2.0, we had the 4 values. So I wonder, which of those, if any, can you, relate the most?
I loved the second manifesto, which talks about diversity, humanity, and sustainability. I think in the current day and age, I think if you take your eye off the ball for any one of those things, it doesn't bode well for the future. And, being someone who has young adults, they will be people who kind of keep people like us, who are in the workforce, very, very accountable for things like, humanity and sustainability and diversity. So that really resonates for me in terms of, what is it that I'd like to actually embody and stand for in the kind of role that I play in the organizations that I have, right?
Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you. And I recall doing the prep for our conversation when you took over the role with Dulux and left Medbank. Somewhere in the interview, I read something you're talking about diversity, how we need to be way beyond gender,
yeah,
sexual orientation, culture. Because I think sometimes when we talk about diversity, especially in tech, there's a lot of thinking like increasing the number of females, working in the tech
yeah,
environment, but diversity
yeah.
goes much broader than that.
Yes, yes, exactly. I mean, I think even in your manifesto, you talk about diversity of thought. I think that is
Mm,
such a critical part of who we are, and particularly in leadership roles, right? How do we actually embody and encourage that diversity of thought, and that you're not necessarily doing, having a whole lot of people that are working with you that are actually all mini-me's, right? Because if you have mini-me's,
mm,
then there's an aspect of what you need to do that you're actually missing because it's in your blind spot, right? So the diversity of thinking brings people who are naturally more inclined to think about how does it impact people, or naturally very process-driven individuals, or naturally individuals who look at, what's the prize, what's the revenue uplift, what is it that we're trying to chase, and the more strategic. And I think what you need to do in order to be successful in any role, and therefore in the organization, and for the organization to be successful, is to have the combination of all of that,
mm, mm.
right? And that's diversity, right? And we all come into the world and grow up through our lives with so many different experiences, and the richness of diversity of how we grow up, I think, adds so much color into how you approach a problem or approach an opportunity, right? I grew up, as I said, I was born in Malaysia, and I've grown up largely, and I've worked in so many different parts of the world. So how I think about things can be very different to someone who's only lived in Australia, as an example, right? But you want both,
Mm.
abilities to actually be in the discussion, not just the one.
So true. And especially for the organization like yours now, with operations in Europe as well, and
Yeah,
New Zealand, Australia. Yeah, and diversity of thought, I think, is so important. I mean, with my work as a coach, often when I'm on board a new client, I try to get assessments around, thinking styles, behavior
yeah,
styles,
yeah,
and often the question is, what's the best style to have in my team? Is like all of them, because you want to see,
yeah.
that combination. So to minimize the number of blind spots, is so true. But also neurodiversity, right? No,
Yes,
which is now, I think, in tech, it's such a topic. I think people like from our generation, if I should say
yeah,
it,
yeah,
the diagnosing people was not a thing. So I think
yeah.
many people in tech is actually are in the spectrum, of many
Yes, yes,
conditions without actually the awareness. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I absolutely agree, and I say that I think, it's about firstly understanding the different types of diversity, and then looking for where those strengths can actually be applied. Where does it come to life? And coming to life is actually about what is the value that it gives the individual in terms of how they are contributing and behaving and doing what they need to do, and feeling that it's actually of value, but also to the organization that it's actually got the outcomes that we're wanting and the direction that we need to go in. So I think, that level of understanding needs to happen, because it's so easy to put people into boxes, right? And I think it's a challenge for most people to not necessarily go to that box and go, oh, so and so was born from a particular part of the world. Oh, they're likely to be X. And you kind of go, well, actually, they are bigger than where they were born.
Mm.
right?
So true.
Yeah.
And I think there is a risk of leaders hiring people who are similar, in many different
Yes.
ways.
Yes.
And that can be detrimental to the diversity of the team, diversity of thought,
Yeah.
and ability to innovate, create, and so on.
Yeah.
I could do a couple of side tracks here, but let's keep going. So
Yeah.
moving to talk about self-care, Angela, you work in a role that I know we've tried to, previous conversations to organize time, and you're very busy, as most CIOs are, and you do a lot of travel, and you have a beautiful family as well. So what do you do, if anything, on a regular basis, or, randomly to keep you, physically, mentally sane? Do you have any routines or rituals, anything that you do to help you to keep up with the pressure?
Yeah. I think I have gotten better with this, Natalie, as I have gotten older, right? I think in my younger years, I would actually forsake my ritual in order to do the work that I needed to do because I had tight deadlines. And, if I needed to do a 15-hour day, I'd do the 15-hour day at the expense of my ritual, right? I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten smarter about it because I think none of it comes at no impact, right? You can go 15 hours in a day and get something out, and you do it in a sustained fashion, and it will tell on you. So my rituals are very much about my self-care. There are two things that I do. One is I do Pilates. I love my Pilates. I went to Pilates this morning. It kind of clears my head. It keeps me kind of toned and muscle. You kind of think, oh, my level of flexibility is better. The older you get, that level of flexibility starts to kind of wane, and you kind of go, no, I need to do something about that, right? So the whole piece around strength and conditioning, and it's also time for myself, right? As you said, I've got a job that keeps me busy. I've got a family that keeps me busy. Excuse me. And it's so easy to ignore me in the midst of all of that, right? So now I make the time. The other thing that I do is I walk. I've got two dogs, and I've got a really close girlfriend. And we talk often about the fact that walking and talking is one of the best things to do because it gets you out into fresh air. It gets you getting your steps up. But she and I'm sure we've solved most of the problems of the world. But
Surely.
it's that ability to talk it out. And when you talk something out, it never feels quite as daunting or overwhelming as when it's just in your head. So that's the other ritual.
Thanks for sharing, Angela. Yeah, absolutely agree. And combining the walking and talking, so you have the social aspect, the
Yeah.
physical, and fresh air, contact with nature. No, 3 in 1.
Yeah.
A winner.
Yeah.
Yes, no brainer.
Yeah.
Very good. And in terms of role models, you have, worked with, several blue chip organizations. We even have one there as a common ground, in the management consulting days.
Yeah.
You were there much earlier than me, so you experience a very different organization. But yeah, so do you have any public figure or someone that you worked with in the past that was somehow inspiring, in terms of great leadership traits, or anyone that has, inspired you in some level?
I think I can talk to someone at work, but I'm going to start with just global role models. And I struggled a little with trying to pick the one because I love Barack Obama. For me, is a role model, right? Why? Because he has been able to kind of test the whole stereotypes, right? And with that, he's an amazing combination of someone who is smart, who actually thinks about the future and the young people and what that needs to look like. But he's so charismatic and articulate in how he represents that. So I look at someone like that and think, those are some amazing leadership qualities that an individual has. that you could actually look at and go, I'd like to do that a little bit more? Or how do I actually kind of, articulate this a little more clearly or a little bit more precisely the way he does, right? I like his level of empathy, and I think that's a really important thing for a lot of leaders in whatever role that you might be in. Empathy, I think, is an important thing because at the end of the day, it can't just be about the price. It has to be about how it's impacting people. Because if it's just about the price, people live in that end outcome, right? And so you need to understand that. You need to be empathetic about what that will mean. You need to be empathetic about how it's impacting the team. And someone like Barack Obama was very much about diversity and inclusion, but he broke that stereotype that people had about a leader of his caliber, a leader of his style, right? He was very, very, even in his language and everything, he was very relatable. But, you need to kind of think, but he's the president. How can he be relatable? Yet he was able to do that with so many different people, right? And when I said I struggle at the start, I thought about him, but I also thought about Michelle Obama. Now she's an amazing individual, and I kind of thought, oh, she was an amazing female leader, which I absolutely adored, and smart woman, knew what she needed to do and got on with it, right? So certainly, I think on the global stage, I'd say for me, Barack Obama kind of stands out, kind of, and he wouldn't be who he is without Michelle as well with him, right? So I kind of think that combination. And then if I think about my own professional career, I think of one particular individual who I had the opportunity to work with. Now, he was someone who actually um, saw me for my potential and where I could go well before I saw it for myself, right? And so he pushed. And I can say that if he hadn't pushed, I probably wouldn't have actually taken some of the roles that I did. And he would always come with the question of, why not, Ange? Why wouldn't you? Whereas, often you kind of go in with a list of why you can't. And he'd go, no, no, tell me about why you can, because I see, there's nothing in that you can't, right? And so I'm always grateful to him for the fact that he kind of forced me to kind of quieten down the little voice on my shoulder, and forced me to become more self-aware, because I think particularly as women leaders, you have this natural tendency to quieten down your voice. And he gave me the I guess option to actually be very clear and loud with my voice. I mean, I'm naturally clear and loud, right? But you just kind of go in with a little bit softer, right? And so he would just continually go, why not? Why not, Ange? Right? And so I'm always thankful to him as someone who actually, I think, learned to tap what he had around him and be that kind of leader that actually, it wasn't about him, it was about the people with him.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Thank you for sharing. Yes, and I absolutely agree. Barack Obama, and Michelle. I think being a woman of color myself, I can relate,
Yeah.
very much so. And yeah, absolutely. And the empathy, the charisma from Barack Obama, traits of emotional intelligence, if you like. Empathy is one of the key qualities of emotional intelligence. And that reminds me of the Mind of the Leader, which is a book that I made a contribution not recently, 2018 now, 7 years, where with the result of research, we identified the mindfulness, compassion, and selflessness are the key traits of leaders in the 21st century. So I think that Barack Obama is a good example of that. Yes, empathy and charisma. And with these mentor that you had early in your career, Angela, that encouraged you or forced you to take risk and to tame the inner
Yeah,
critic.
yeah,
I wonder how much you like internalizing that person, because I know that you also mentor, and we
yes, I
spoke
do.
earlier about the Mindful CIO community of you mentoring, and I know now I've been reading your recommendations that you received on LinkedIn. So there's this theme of being a coach, a mentor, and
Yeah.
helping to develop people as well. So I wonder if there was an influence of having that opportunity, being mentored, and now you wanted to kind of give back.
I think actually my inclination, my natural inclination in wanting to mentor and coach and do all of that is something that just naturally comes. It's something that I enjoy. If you asked me where do I get my joy, it would be from watching people grow, right? And I've been very fortunate in that I've held a lot of roles with a lot of people in teams that work with me that have, even when I've moved organizations and everything, have continued to kind of, pop in or tap in and say, hey, can I have a quick chat about blah? I'm thinking about this. And so I find, providing that kind of energy and time actually invigorates me as well. It's not just about me giving, it's actually
Mm,
I get something out of it as well, right? As I said, I love watching people grow. And I think the biggest thing is of individuals that I've had in my teams and watching them become CIOs and watching them become senior people within the technology community or even within the business, right? So, um, and I think having that previous leader that kind of mentored me in that way. Those are some of the examples that you see that you think you can work, but we all bring our own styles to it. He had a very different style, right? And I don't know that I would necessarily employ a lot of. He and I got on really well, so the styles worked. Um, and he is Eastern European, so a very kind of, and it was really funny. I remember one time when we were talking about something and we were doing a transformation, and I said, oh, I think you should kind of try and catch up with a few people for coffees and just kind of get a sense of how they're feeling and where they're at. And he said, and I am Eastern European. I don't catch up for coffees. That's why I have you. But
Diversity, right?
yeah, correct, and it worked. And so I think part of the joy that I get is very much about, I've been doing this for a long time, and through it I've had a lot of experiences. And so if I can share and pay some of that forward, why not?
Mm.
Right? Hopefully you leave the world a little bit better.
Mm. Fantastic. No, planting seeds. Um, so one thing that I read, can't remember where now, but something around your leadership style being firm but fair. And now we're moving to, before we talk about AI and
Yeah, yeah.
challenges from your current role. I'd love to hear any stories that you may have around the non-technical aspects of being a tech executive. So things that often come up with my coaching clients or here the guests around leading change or managing competing priorities and stakeholders,
Yeah,
the demands from different stakeholders, or getting buy-in from the board on
yeah,
budget
yeah.
and talent retention or people development, attraction and retention. So what comes to mind, if any, story around non-technical aspects of being a tech executive, Angela, with your vast experience?
For a lot of the roles that I went into, a lot of that was actually to lead some kind of change or transformation that the organization was going through, right? And a lot like most people, one of the key things I think in leading change is understanding some of what didn't work previously and how you actually then want to create a better environment. And I heard someone talk very much about uh, you get better from the things that didn't go right. if you're only surrounded by success, you don't get better, right? So I can talk about leading change where, way back in my younger years when I led a program of change, you kind of tend to do it far more in a structured, this is what the process says we need to do, this is how I'm going to do it. That didn't necessarily get the buy-in that it needed. And then when I reflected on that and looked at the next organization that I moved to, a lot of that was because I followed process. I didn't bring the human side of it into that change. And the human side of it actually kind of works at all levels, right? Because on one hand, you talk about, getting buy-in from the board. You need to be able to articulate it at that senior level so that they get why you need to do what you need to do. At Cathay Pacific Airways, we were going through a transformation where we were changing our reservation and ticketing system. Alongside it, we were doing our digital transformation. Now, that was a whole lot of change that was happening to that business, that if the execs didn't come on board, it is hard work, right? And so you talk at the board level, but then you need to be able to articulate it at all levels. What does it mean to the next level down? And is it going to change their jobs? And if it does, actually, what's in it for them? What is the value proposition to doing this change? Just doing change? And it has to be, people are smart, Nathalie, right? You can't just use weasel words to describe it. You need to get real. You need to get tangible about how this will make their day better, their month better, their year better, and the kind of work that they do will actually be so much better than where they are today, right? At your team level, people need to understand that as well. So today I might be a developer and I'm talking about actually development in this is now going to change, and we get, engineering, what does that need to look like? And guess what? You now will become a multi-skilled individual who becomes far more marketable in the market. Why would you not go for that? Right? You need to take the time out, though. You need to take the time out to have those discussions at all those levels, right? If you're a leader that only focuses at the level up or at your peer level, it is a hard get to then, because change, as we all know, has a very long tail. And if you can't get the tail moving, there's so much pain involved in the change. Right? So you need to invest the time. You need to invest the time knowing why at this level, why at this level, why at the next level down, what does that look like? And then being available, being open to people kind of going, Angela, do you have 5 minutes? I just had a question about blah, and if you are sitting somewhere where you say, no, you've got to actually get a time slot in your diary, it's hard to have those conversations. And I'm a huge advocate for the hybrid style of working where you're actually in the office for a few days and you work from home a few other days. And I think that allows for that human connection. I think the human connection is so important, right? So yeah, leading change, I think, is a hard one. And getting buy-in from the board is really important. The buy-in from the board always comes down to being very clear around your financial acumen has to be strong so that you can talk in terms of maximizing shareholder value, right? But I think as a good leader, you can't just talk about maximizing shareholder value if you can't talk about what does that mean to the people? What does that mean to the customer? What does that mean to the consumer? Right? It can't just be about, I've done the numbers and the numbers say that we're going to be great coming out of this. Something I heard a while ago is a phrase, and the phrase basically was, never just ask, can you do it? Because often the answer will be yes. The more intricate question, the more complex question is, should you do it? Right? Because that means you have to apply a level of, what we talked about, EQ, a level of, whilst for the business, you might be able to do something by saying increasing interest rates in some product that you have, right? But that actually might well mean that your customers are impacted negatively in some way. But you're actually maximizing shareholder, because that's a very interesting kind of conflict, right, between shareholder and customer, right? You can increase shareholder value, but do you want to do it at the expense of your customer actually having a bad experience? Right? Where is that happy balance? And I think you need to be able to tell that story at the board level. Right.
Wow. Wow. Thanks, Angela. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing there, the last piece was around the critical thinking holistically.
Yeah.
It's not just about shareholder value, but it's also what's the impact, positive, negative, to stakeholders, including customers, very important group of stakeholders, of course, and ability to sell the message, articulate the message in the board level, but also cascade down to all the, the stages in the organization, everyone involved, articulating what's in it for me, so people actually can understand, and bringing every individual board, because it can be a very expensive exercise to install a system, the language that I use when I did change management training a while ago, that it's very easy to install a system versus implement, right? It's just a terminology, installing versus implementing. So adoption, if you don't do what you described there to get the buy-in from every individual, make yourself available, approachable, to address, the concerns, you can implement, you can install a system, doesn't necessarily that means that will be, embraced, and that can be a very expensive exercise. I myself being in a number of projects of, multi-million dollars, that adoption change was done poorly, and therefore adoption wasn't there. It can be a very, very expensive exercise. Yes. Yes, and it takes, I think, experience, right? Because as you mentioned, Angela, the process is not that hard to follow, right? The process for change, there is a recipe, but the human element, it's often where the bottleneck is.
Yeah. And I think individuals who can span that bridge of understanding the process, but then applying that human piece to it, are your birds of paradise, right? Because they kind of get it. Right? Because you could go too much on either side, where you kind of do a lot of the human side, but you kind of don't do the process right, and therefore you miss certain things, or you just become process and you go, actually, I don't really understand how it impacts people or the customer, the consumer, or whichever group that you're talking about, right? So I think it's kind of getting that right combination.
So, Angela, with your very extensive experience, in the change space and many other areas, transformation and so on, fast forwarding to today, at Dulux Group, I was just looking at the dates. I think you just had your 3rd anniversary, or So, what are the key, some of the key challenges you're facing today, if any, with your current role?
My currently, I guess my emphasis and where I'm putting the bulk of my energy, like a lot of organizations, around data, better understanding the data that we have. We talk, everyone talks about AI. Every second, presentation that you go to from an external vendor of some description will tell you about AI and all the amazing tools that they have. So there is a mix in that space around needing to do what we need to do with our data and make sure that our data is architected in the right way, and that we have both the integrity of data, the single source of truth of data, let alone then kind of unleash it with the likes of AI and everything else, right? So there's some fundamental things that we need to kind of do in that space. And it's like a lot of organizations that kind of face into that. And I've spoken to so many of my peers within other parts of the industries and, talk about the same thing, right? The other is that we are an organization that prides ourselves in how we go to market. We're a well understood brand and continuing to make the marks that we need to do in the marketplace. We're global as well, and in that we've got a number of acquisitions in Europe. So how do we actually bring the best out in all of these organizations, right? Not just working to a particular outcome that might be right for here in Australia, but how does that play out for somewhere in Europe, as an example? Trying to be mindful and fit for purpose, really, in terms of the solutioning that we provide, right? Cyber is another key part. And again, I don't think that I'm saying anything that seemed to be particularly different if you spoke to any one of my peer group in the CIO land. Cyber is something that my CISO will say to me, it's not if, it's when. So, of course, we're all on high alert. But then the key thing in this, I think about cyber a little like we do what we need to do to keep ourselves safe and have the right cyber, security posture. So the analogy I often draw is your home. You keep it secure by having a safety screen door at your front door, or you might actually put in some security screenings, both externally and internally, so that, people know, or you might have dogs that bark when people kind of walk past. Why do you do all of that? To a large degree, so that anyone who's thinking of burglarizing your home goes, actually, you're too much like hard work. I'm going to go next door. They don't have the screen. They don't have a dog. I'll go there. So, a lot of what we do is kind of preemptively kind of defensive, just so you kind of block. But if someone really wants to do something, right? And so for me in the cyber world, it's about making sure that the basics are all done. And, I'm very happy to say that we are an organization, but how do we continue to stay relevant? How do we continue to do what we need to do in that space? And all organizations do that, right? Or most organizations, I should say. And then, of course, our core ERP and where are we and what do we need to do? There's a whole lot of thinking that's going on in that space. So a bit that's keeping us busy, keeping me busy.
Sounds like plenty going on. And of course, you came from Medibank before, was a previous role, right, Angela, and a very highly regulated industry.
Yeah.
But in Dulux, you don't have that regulation, but you have a complexity of many, many, many brands. I remember when we met and I was like, oh yeah, Dulux, the paint. And you were like, yes, we have many other brands. It's not just the paint. I think it's the iconic, very renowned brand for the painting. But, for those who are not aware, check it out. Dulux has from gardening, products to garage doors, and it's very, very diverse. So with that comes a high complexity. So coming back to the human-centric leadership style, Angela, how can, is that possible, a human-centric leadership style in tech have a positive impact to bottom line and achieving outcomes? I know that you're very outcomes driven, as a leader. So can you see the connection there? How can we articulate for those who are not sold into adopting a human-centric leadership style in tech? How can we articulate that link?
I think the tie-in is so visible now, right? And what do I mean by that? I take myself as an example. If I am in a good place and I feel, I've done my walk and I've done my Pilates, I go into the day feeling good, and therefore how I then approach problem solving, how I then talk to the team around certain things that need to be done, or even the level of strategic thinking that I need to apply to some of the things that I need to do is at the best space possible, right? If I have a team that have worked massive hours and are really tired and then it becomes a bit of a chore to actually go in the next day to work, I can tell you hands down, I'm not going to get the best person. I'm not going to get the best team. I'm going to get people who will deliver more than likely, but it's not to the extent of their potential and their capability. And for all of us, the potential and capability is also about feeling valued. When you can unleash that, you feel valued. When you feel valued, you want to do more because it's exciting, it's fun, and then the other thing that I often say to people about, human-centric type leadership is we spend an awful lot of our time at work. Imagine not being happy at work. That's an awful lot of your day being unhappy. There's something wrong with that equation. So why would you not invest your time to actually bring out the best in your people and have them happy and have them engaging and have them feeling like they belong within the organization? And that comes from everything that we do, from diversity of thinking to, gender to you want everyone to feel ethnic diversity. You want to feel like you belong, because that for a lot of people talk about mental health, right? One of the things around mental health is about loneliness. Part of coming to work is about actually encouraging people to connect, to have discussions, to go out for lunch, grab a coffee, talk about whatever. That level of connection, and that's the belonging, right? You have people feeling good about themselves. Guess what? They are happy to do what they need to do to get the job done, right?
Beautiful. Thanks, Angela. And the research do back up what you just said, that, discretionary effort is a result of leaders who exhibit a good level of emotional intelligence, and not that we are doing that to get a discretionary effort, but is a byproduct. Yeah, 100%. Yes. And also create an environment which is healthy, safe, and psychological safe, so people want to stay as well. Wonderful. I'm conscious of time, Angela. So maybe the last couple of questions before we start to wrap up. So you already touched on AI, the hype around it, especially Gen AI and etc.
Yeah.
So we spoke about in the prep call about the ownership, where the ownership lies in AI. Where do you believe ownership should lies in AI, and also the role of CIOs, CTOs on guiding the business to ensure that adoption of AI is actually done responsibly and ethically.
Yeah.
So whichever way you want to go first, ownership or ethics, it's your choice. Where should we get started?
Yeah. I don't think about it as much about ownership, because ownership means that with it comes a little bit of kind of the turf war. And I think that actually works against us as in any part of that ownership piece, right? I think I am a big proponent of role clarity, because if you have role clarity, then you're doing what you need to do within your role, right? Ownership is not so much what I would describe. I think when I think about something like AI, and I think digital kind of went through that metamorphosis, over the period of time where, initially it might have started in technology, but actually digital kind of sits very squarely as something between the businesses and IT being part of the business, right? And so you have digital, where you have, your product owners who sit in marketing and who sit in the business, but your core developers kind of sit within IT. And that's kind of the hopefully seamless nature of how that capability is delivered. So in a similar fashion, I think about AI in the same way. I think there are roles for different parts of the business, including ourselves in IT, that we play The technical engineering, what do we need to do? The thought leadership around all of that needs to kind of come from people who've kind of grown up in that space and understand that space and can see what needs to happen. But on the flip side, what do you want to do with it? Where do you want to go? How do you want to utilize it? How do you get the value for the business? It's the people in the marketing space, it's the people in the sales space, it's the people in the strategy of the business that are actually articulating that. And so you want to have it as a co-created ownership of how value chain works rather than a hierarchy type model,
I like the idea of the co-created ownership. I think maybe I picked the wrong word when I was talking about ownership. I'm thinking about governance. Who drives the governance aspect? But it sounds like a shared. Who is going to drive and be responsible for? So it is a shared responsibility by the sounds of it.
I think it is a shared responsibility, even governance, right? If you don't have data stewards who are from the business, who actually understand the data that they are actually collecting, you can't have IT trying to govern that data because we don't know the level of detail that the business understand. Right? I think it becomes a very difficult road to walk on if you kind of go, oh, no, this is owned by IT. And
that,
yeah, it's a hard one.
Sorry, I'm getting excited, but I'm conscious of time. And that's the ultimate challenge, right? Because with my background in data analytics, and business intelligence before I changed careers, and there was the space, especially around the governance for data analytics. And, it's good luck to implement any AI solutions if you don't have your data in place. And you mentioned the key challenge. I think that's, that's absolutely paramount. And because garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't get our data right, how can you benefit of the wonders of AI? Yes. And that really it's a combined effort with the business and IT. Yes. And around the ethics, the responsible adoption, Angela, we have, as you know, the regulations around AI, it's running behind, the rapid developments of AI solutions, and countries are trying to catch up, and legislation takes a long time. While we don't have those frameworks in place, CIOs are kind of influencing decisions, right? So how can CIOs, CTOs, influence, or what's the role you see in guiding the business to implement AI responsibly and ethically, if any?
I think, it's like most things in life, right? You want to be doing everything that you're doing ethically and responsibly. It doesn't just apply to AI, right? If you're making decisions about something, you need to be doing it ethically and responsibly. So I think AI is but one of those things that you think about in terms of, is there a possible scenario where this will actually represent it poorly on, data bias is an example, right? If you have data, your data is of a particular, it has one gender represented more so than another, then whatever you do with AI on it will represent the overrepresented gender. Right now, is that actually reflective of the world at large? No. So how do you actually make sure that you're asking those critical questions around biases, around how will it be utilized? There is obviously the governance part of it where a lot of your data is your data. You don't want it getting into the hands of your competitors. So how do you actually govern that? And nothing takes away, though, at the end of the day, of people having the accountability of being responsible, ethical, and common sense needs to prevail. Someone said to me a long time ago, common sense is such an interesting word in that there's nothing common about common sense. The things you take for granted and you kind of go, surely that's common sense. Then you watch a group of people work on something and you go, hang on, surely you've asked that question, right? So sometimes it's about the process and having some of those questions for those that aren't thinking about it, just so you can do the prompt, right? But I still will come back to human intervention will never go away. Human intervention is about bringing the ethics and the responsibility and the common sense into it. You cannot bypass that.
Yes, thank goodness. Thanks, Angela. Yes, so I'm hearing mindful of the data that you're using, the train, the quality and how biased the data that you use in training your AI models. Is that a representation of your community, of your audience, the people who will be impacted by the system, the solutions, and keeping humans in the loop, human intervention. Yes, by all means, yes. Wonderful. Oh, I feel we need to do part 2. We're running out of time, Angela, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I often close the episode with, we covered a lot of ground anyway, but if you have any final tip on how to sustainably and mindfully lead high-performing teams, or a story or a quote, anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners, please do.
When I think about mindfully and sustainably leading high-performing tech teams, the first for me as a leader is I think you need to be humble. I think humility comes with a keenness to learn. That means you are probably learning from someone 4 levels below you or someone 2 levels below you. And all you're doing is asking the questions, but why did you do that? And not coming into a situation thinking that you've got all the answers, right? So it's about being humble. It's about knowing, yes, you bring experience and all the rest of it, but oh my God, you've got such talented people within the teams that you want to learn from them. You want to grow with them, right? I think that's one part of it. The other is, I think, be present and be available. Because people want to come and connect. People want to run things past you. If you are that leader that's kind of several steps removed, you don't stay connected. You don't hear about the things that are going on within the team that actually is making a difference, right? So I think being available and being present. And I think lastly, you got to be a good storyteller. If it needs to resonate with your business and with your teams, you need to be able to tell the story. If you can't tell the story and give it just from facts and figures, people understand the facts and figures, but it doesn't resonate, right? So I think you've got to learn to be a good storyteller around it.
Well said, Angela. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time and your energy. It's been a joy really to connect with you. And I look forward to reconnect with you on the gala dinner for the Tech Diversity Awards in August. So we'll see you that again. And yes, very grateful. You enjoy the rest of your day and we'll speak soon.
Thank you, Nathalie. And thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this as well. And I look forward to the gala dinner.
Thanks for tuning in and joining our discussion today. If you're learning from this podcast, please subscribe, give us a good rating, and share it with your friends. If you have any questions or suggestions about guests you'd like me to interview here in the Mindful CIO podcast, please share in the comments below. Last not least, thank you for your interest in the human side of tech leadership. See you in the next episode.